I'm Mike Boris, and this is Straight Talk.
Michael Cheika, welcome to Straight Talk, mate.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be here, actually.
Mate, I think last time we saw each other, you, me, and a couple of other blokes had a lunch in some fancy joint, which you paid for. Did you pay for it?
And I think you did, actually.
Yeah, well, there's got to be a square up. But by the way, is that the reason you're leaving the country?
What, not to pay the rent?
So you don't have to pay for lunch?
No. I'd like to hit back there at some stage. There was a nice luncheon. So
I mean, Greeks are really mean. I'm not sure. So what about the Lebanese?
Mate, we're givers.
Sure?
Yeah. Well, look, from very young, coming in, like my family my parents came to the country, and then my place was always the drop-in centre, right? So free food. I'd come home from school some days, and my mates would be there at the in the kitchen before I was even home eating. So it was always a giving place as far as food's concerned.
Where did you grow up as a kid?
Yeah, Coogee, born and bred. Yeah, my old man came to Australia probably 1950, and my mum came later. He met her here. So he started like, I've told this story before, but I suppose it leads into a bit of how I got involved in footy, really, because when they turned up, they had nothing, and so the
What were they running away from a war or something?
Well, I'd say maybe civil.
Yeah.
Like
Internal.
village politics, which could happen, and I think things probably got heated. So, and it was a lot rougher back then, Guns were drawn back in the day.
It's pretty rough now too, by the way. Right at the moment it's a bit
different,
ordinary.
But it's been run by different people,
Yeah.
I think the villagers are more happy to stay cool and relax, but it's more the bigger players in the marketplace that are pushing that conflict, but that's another story. So when he came, and we had one mate with him, and they said the cab driver asked them where they're from, and they said, oh, well, they couldn't speak much English, so Lebanon. So they didn't have anywhere to go. He dropped them at Redfern Park because the church was there, right? And so from there, Redfern Oval was across the road, and I think as part of assimilating, they go to the footy.
Is that like a Maronite church or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that. I think I know that one. It's just a little bit up the road from, probably the new one is, but it's just a sort of bit up from Redfern where they play footy. It's where the actual community park is.
It's just a bit further up. You go past the community park, and there's the one way it comes down Elizabeth Street.
So it goes
up
more towards the cities from Redfern.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I know that one.
So it's just around the corner. And I think they probably shacked up in a hostel there somewhere, and that's where they started, getting involved in footy. And obviously a lot of the Lebs back then would have gone west. That was where the community was. But my father decided that east was more of the go, and he moved out there, and we stayed there ever since.
Yeah, so they had nowhere. They're in a taxi, and they didn't have a place to go to, as such.
That's what a lot of the immigrants would have had, mate. But I think there's stories even from them where some got on boats thinking they were going to America. They end up in Australia. Well, how would you know? You wouldn't know what you were getting off to. That's what we're so blessed these days. We can see everything before we go there, But when they turned up, I suppose it was, and I think it leads into a bit of even my own character around, not risk taking, but being prepared to take a chance sometimes, because they leave no certainty they're ever going to go back and see their parents, which my father never did. No certainty of when they can get back there in the pursuit of getting a better life, which obviously Australia offered back then. And yeah, I think he was very happy with his decision, even though he missed a lot of things from back in Lebanon. Very happy to be coming here and to live in Australia.
And how many kids are there in the family, your family?
Yeah, I've got a brother and a sister, both older. So as
you're the baby,
ethnic kid, so I got the dream run. They did all the damage for me, and I just got the dream run after that. And then I've in turn got 4 of my own. Yeah.
Do you remember as a child, when you first, like when you're a young kid, do you remember there being much of a Lebanese community? Because you ultimately moved out of Coogee, because you went to school at Marsland, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Catholic school in Randwick.
Yeah.
Do you remember whether or not your family, maybe not you because you're at school, but your family, whether or not you had much of a Lebanese community that you blended into?
Definitely. Yeah. My dad was I think because he was there early, and he was interested in the political side of things. He got involved in the community. He helped people when they arrived into Australia, helped them find their bearings, help them with jobs and stuff like that. Because like they would just do whatever they could. I think my old man, was railways, then worked at the Singer sewing machine factory and the glass factory there. They do a bit of everything. So, but he didn't go and live in that part of the community, which was interesting. So he became a bit of a I suppose, a leader in the community. In fact, he got an MBE for services
Really?
to the ethnic community,
Wow.
for the Lebanese community in Australia. There, he was given that award.
That's mad. That's
Yeah, he was, and he did a lot, and then got involved in the politics of it as well, and got to know a fair few of the pollies here in Australia as well when it came to how they dealt with the ethnic communities and helping out with the ethnic communities in Australia. Ethnic Affairs Commission, I think, it was called.
because a lot of Lebanese, particularly the Christian Lebanese, who were the only ones I knew growing up, moved out or lived out where I lived in the west suburbs.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
like my school, Catholic school, was in Lakemba. Was probably half the kids were Lebanese,
Yeah.
and I'm talking now, in the mid '60s, because there was the big war in Lebanon, as I recall, and everybody sort of left. And a lot of
70s, yeah, it started coming.
70s,
Yeah,
well, yeah.
60s, 70s, yeah, that started happening. And a lot of Australia took refugees as well at that time, I think. And the community grew out there. You've only got to go to a Bulldogs game at Belmore. You'll
Yeah.
see what it's all about. Or, you saw the last World Cup of Rugby League that was here in Australia. I think the Lebs had a few home games, there was that many people there. But there is a strong community that's all through that west, southwest, in Sydney I'm talking about, west, southwest, and also even into the northwest, a bit more Parramatta-ish around there. So there's a very strong community.
Especially
around
now.
there.
Hey, speaking of the Lebanese community, I mean, I have to ask you the question because James Simons of Aussie Home Loans fame, heard. I told him because I was having a coffee with him outside before he got here that you were coming in. And he said to me, ask Check about my father or grandfather. Somebody saved your father on a plane or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you what he told me, right? Jimmy, this is, mate, it could be bullshit, but I'm going to test it out on the real deal here, okay? And you'll be listening to this, I know. You told me that Check's father carried your father, Michael, on his shoulder off a plane and saved his life. Okay, can I just get that? Can you talk about his? No, your dad carried his dad. No, sorry.
No,
So again,
other way around.
his father,
Yeah,
I should say, his father, Michael, carried your father off a plane and saved his life.
Yeah. Well, the Simons have had an interesting hookup with us since day one. So one of the only numbers or connections that my father would have had back when he arrived would have been James's grandfather, Michael's father. Yeah. And there was a connection there between them early on, and that ran through. So when things started to happen, there was a connection. My dad had a business eventually, which he connected him with Michael around, which was James's dad. And they were on a trip, I'm pretty sure, over to the Middle East or something like that. They were doing a showcase like in the Middle East for Australian products. Something like that was going on. And my dad had heart issues, always. It never really stopped him, between, I think the congenital heart issues. He was a good smoker. He didn't mind a smoke as well. So he was starting to get a bit sick, but he refused to stop doing any of these things. I think on one of the trips they went over, he struggled on the plane, and there was a bit of action on there. Michael was involved, and I think they, the Simons, they might big note
Gilded the lily a little bit.
Yeah, well, of course, you know what I mean. The waves are always bigger a few years later, but he helped Dad in a tricky situation on the plane, and then gave him the support. He had to go to hospital I'm not sure where they landed. He had to go to hospital at that time. So, yeah, there's always been a strong link there between them. And I remember when my father passed, that grandfather Simon, John, came and saw him, and one of the last days. So there was always, even though we weren't close on a day-to-day basis, there was always a very strong connection from the very first, part of his immigration to Australia.
Can we look at Michael Cheika, a kid at school at Marsland? Let's say you're 15. What game are you playing? What sport?
Yeah, league.
You're playing league for Marsland?
Yeah.
Were you playing rugby as well?
We play on weekends sometimes.
Yeah, we play
because you
Ramwick,
could play. Well, there was
juniors.
Marsland had there was a club team around the local area,
Would have been Randwick, I guess.
Probably, yeah. That fed into Randwick Rugby, and we lived just up the road from the Rugby. So it's funny how the principal can decide a lot, right? So my brother went to Marsden as well, and they were playing rugby at school, and then the principal changed when I came in there. They focused much more on league. They played both, so they just went for league, and I suppose that was our demographic, growing up playing league, and we had a good team, and we were state champions at the end of our school year.
I think was Rogan in your side?
Rogan was in the side, yeah, and we didn't have a whole lot of guys that kicked on actually, but we had a strong team, and it was all about rugby league growing up.
So
yeah.
how'd you get into rugby union? So what was that
Well,
process?
like I said, we played a bit on weekends, and Randwick was just down the road. My brother was playing footy club, and this is going to sound bad, mate, but I genuinely thought we were pretty. I wouldn't say we were poor, but we weren't wealthy either. We were very working class, and I wanted to travel. I thought maybe I can get a free trip playing rugby playing overseas if I played rugby. That was generally my thought process, and so I switched over, played Colts at Randwick, and I tried to double up for a while to see, because I played ball for Roosters as well.
Well, let's just stop there for a second, because Trent Robinson told me this morning, after I beat him up on the jiu-jitsu mats, that he said, ask Check. He said, Check, he said, I'm pretty sure he played SG ball, which in those days probably under 17 or something,
Yeah,
for the mighty Sydney Roosters.
that is correct.
It's true.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah. A few of us came into that crew there, and that would have been a goal then to go on and play in rugby league sort of after doing that. But I was doing sort of both at the same time, trying to hedge my bets. At that age, it was just league. Then afterwards, I had decided to go play Colts after I finished school.
Rugby Colts.
Yeah, and have a go at that. So I played a year there, and then I played Australian 20s as it was, 21s maybe, as it was back there. And I literally before rugby went pro, I got connected into a guy from France who took me over, and I started playing in '89 for a team called Castres, which is in the south of France near Toulouse. And it was unreal. Like it was a whole new experience. And back then, before the game was pro, which happened in sort of '96, so this was '89, you could play all year round. So you'd get paid under the table there. Hopefully they won't come back and get me now. You got looked after, let's say, back then. And you could play both seasons. So I could play 7 months there, or 7 months there, miss the start of the season here and come back and play for Randwick, like just my club team then in the end, and play 5 months here. So it was great.
I'd be interested to know, as someone who's a student of both rugby league and rugby union, and obviously in rugby union, we'll talk about your coaching career in rugby union in a moment, and you've also coached as assistant coach and Coach Lebanon, of course, but assistant coach at the Roosters. But if you reflect back on your days playing both codes as a young man, as a teenager, what is it that rugby league indoctrinates or evolves in a young man that is beneficial for them if they go to play rugby union? Is there something that league gives these individuals that you would love to see in the rugby union boys?
Yeah, I think like the thing of rugby league, by the nature of the game, there's a lot bigger contacts, right? Because of the run up that you get between the contacts. So it's a little different too, because in rugby union, every ball is contested. Right.
Yep.
Whereas in rugby league, every ball isn't contested. There's some scenarios that are contested. So the way you can go to a collision, to a contact, is totally different. I mean, whether you're the ball carrier or whether you're the defender, you can fully commit because there's no other things going on. There's no lying in the ruck. There's no any of that, right? So you can commit fully to the contact part of the game. And I think the contact distance, the run up you get in league to be able to come to contact, builds a certain edge about you. You've got to be ready.
Edge,
I think there's a double edge that makes you. You can talk about tough players, but then there's also hard players, and there's two different things. Tough player can take a beating and get up and keep going. A hard player can dish one out,
yeah,
and then be able to get on with a game without getting too caught up in it. I think that helped me when I crossed over to union, because I probably wasn't as talented as a lot of guys, but I had that edge about about me when I played. I was able to to bring a hybrid version of that, because rugby you don't get the run-ups as much because the defence is closer to the attack. It's a different type of contact work, and it just gave me a different type of edge, I think, and it gives players a different type of edge around, okay, I'm alone in this collision. I've got to make it work, because when you're running and carrying the ball, you haven't got anyone cleaning out behind you. You've got usually 2 or 3 guys coming at you, and you know what you've got to try and do in that situation.
So does that inform you as I'm not talking necessarily about you coaching at the levels you coach at, but if you're looking at the rugby union nursery, does that inform you as to some things that you would actually, if you were like, the head coach of all rugby union people in Australia, like from adults right down to little kids, does that inform you as to what you might train into the young people, or does it matter?
No, I think it suits some, doesn't suit everyone. So I don't think you need to indoctrinate. There's different types of players. I was a forward. Is that applicable to a halfback or to a 5'8"? Or, I think that those issues related to me because it was the style that I like to play. Edge, that bit of edge helps all players, obviously, because it's probably mental as well as physical, right? And learning how to do that. And I suppose being prepared to be, but probably being a bit more mentally prepared for that, that type of, I suppose, scenario, that type of confrontation is something that I think can be helpful for kids as they start to get into the older ages, not when they're too young, when they start to get into the older ages, because that can be the big difference. And, my own kids, I like them to play both games because I like them to experience both forms of that contact, the collision, which is such a big part of our games because they're contact games.
Because, I look at the Joseph Suaalii, and he's obviously putting aside for the moment his big contract and all that sort of, not controversial, that sort of Hollywood stuff that goes on around him.
Yeah.
And he's a great kid. But I wonder if one of the reasons why the rugby union went after him is because of his rugby league background, or what was it that makes him so good?
Well, he's obviously talented from a talent
Athletically.
and as a sportsman as well, a sports person. I've been fortunate enough to see him coming through, and then also coach a guy like, say, Israel, who he'd be compared to very often. I think Joe's got a really good blend. I don't see it from the outside. I haven't had a lot to do with him hands on. He's got a great blend of both. He's got the background of rugby, so he understands the contest for the ball scenario. He understands the movements off the ball, and he's definitely got the hard edge from league. I think he definitely would have learnt that by going and playing at Roosters and playing. He grew up in the South Academy and then came through with Roosters, where he's got a tough and a hard edge. Like, he can take a hammering and he can dish one out.
He certainly can dish it out.
Yeah, and I think you could see what that can do is he can actually, this is going to sound a bit odd, make other players play better by having that involved in his game, like that he can make other players perform better because they feel that from him. That's when other guys, those types of players who have got that edge, they can actually make other players play better because they like to play with them.
And because I often wonder, I used to be a great fan of rugby union, and I'm talking about the more the late 90s, early 2000s period, and there were certain players I used to love to watch. And I used to, the game to me anyway, used to be more free-flowing, and the ball would get out to the wing or out to a centre. There wasn't as much kicking, and it just looked like to me that the players were backing themselves a little bit, or the coaches allowing the players to back themselves. And I think rugby union has lost some popularity, particularly Australian rugby union. And league's gone in leaps and bounds. And if you listen to, if you believe what Peter Vlander says, which I do, in Peter we believe, that rugby league has actually increased its viewership, and that could be there could be a whole number of reasons for that. But is the reason why rugby union is not has lost in popularity relative to rugby league is the reason because of that is that rugby union needs more of those types of players like Suaalii.
I think there's a combination of things, mate. I think there is a requirement of more players coming into the system that will have different skill sets. So not just that hard edge or like Joe, but other types of players. You look at one thing that you got to keep in context, Mark, is that rugby in Europe is not losing popularity
No.
whatsoever. It's firing, right? So we have a different thing down here that we want from our players. than maybe
Explain
what
that
they
to me.
want.
I don't understand.
Well, it's the culture, traditions. The teams. There's some teams in Europe that are very tight, forward-based games. They like the kick and chase and the set pieces, etc. It's part of how they've been brought up on their rugby. So if their team doesn't perform like that, they actually don't like it. We have,
You mean the members?
yeah,
the
the fans. Yeah, that's where the popularity of the
Yeah.
game is. I'm not talking about performance here. I'm talking about the popularity. So they like that. Now some will want more, and there'll always be. You can't always keep everybody
No.
happy. But we had that era that you're talking about there. We did have an advantage over the Northern Hemisphere teams back then because we had rugby league and we had AFL, so there was a real athletic ball sports tradition here where we played and we threw the ball around. It was different, and the opposition was different. Oppositions have changed as well. They've been able to become more professional, more ready for what would come from the Southern Hemisphere as well across the board. And I suppose if I look at, say, South Africa and New Zealand, they've got different positions in the sporting world inside of their own countries. So I think the popularity of and one of the big things there, Mark, is that the rules. So you see how league just changed the rules. Start of the season, 6 again, this one
Yep.
here, that one there, get the fatigue up, however, whatever the
Make it
intention of
faster.
the rules are, make it faster. We can't do that in rugby. We need World Rugby to change rules across the board for everybody.
Right.
And no one in the Northern Hemisphere is looking for those types of rule changes,
So
realistically.
So is the audience different in the Northern Hemisphere? Because I mean, you're right too, by the way. Because Ireland is like killing it, whereas they weren't 25 years ago.
No.
They wouldn't make anything. Like there was nothing going on. And 25 years ago, it was Australia, New Zealand, and the Springboks. Like that was it.
Yep.
That were the three mobs you want to watch. Sometimes, maybe Argentina every now and then.
Yeah.
And there might be a Barbarians game or something, which would be interesting to watch against one of the other mobs. But that's what I watched. That's what I enjoy watching. I sort of dropped off over a period of time. And rugby union too was also very wealthy. ARU was seemed to me anyway, that they had a lot of money. And then all of a sudden it just sort of, I had Hoylesy on here, he has his view on these things, but what happened? What has the fans in Europe love this style of game in Europe? Why have our fans dropped off? Have they stopped loving the style of game here? Do we have to change the style of game here to get our fans back on board?
I think that a lot of people may have lost access to watch the game. The game,
you mean in terms of broadcast?
Well, the whole thing, like venues, because you could go now because of Super Rugby, you could go without a game being played in Sydney for 5 weeks because of the way the draw might work. You might get 3 in a row, and then you might not get one for. So, what are the kids going to watch on a day now? If you promote club rugby in a different way and build it up, then they've got somewhere that it's a draw card for them to go to and have the experience of the event, because that's what people want when they go. They want to watch a game, but they also want the event. They want to go and see the stars or the players they look up to, and if the kids are going, the parents are going, and so on and so forth. So I think that we haven't given. I remember when Joe came in as a kid, Joe Suaalii. He came in as a kid, maybe 15 or 16, into the Wallabies when I was coaching there, and he didn't know many of the players. He knew Israel. He knew a couple of others who had played, in NRL, because maybe he hasn't had the access to be able to go and see those guys turn up, or different players turn up, and I think that's really important. We've got to give people access to be able to see the game either at the ground or on TV more. And whether it's the content, the amount of content that's being viewed, I'm not even to be honest, I'm not sure how the club rugby's if it's being shown on any free to wear channels or anything like that. But kids need more of that access, and by nature, they get more interested. I know when my kids go to watch something, whether they go watch the soccer. Okay, over in the UK, we went to watch a game when they came over to visit. Right? Then they started getting interested, having a look. Like, what's on here? How can I see more of this, etc. Become members of the Liverpool or whatever, because they get attached to the piece that comes around, and that's why we all support teams. Is because we identify with something that's inside of that club. I like that club for this reason. I like that team because I want to be associated with what it stands for.
It's very interesting that because as you know, I'm a Robbo fan, and you're great mates of Trent Robinson, like on lots of levels. Robbo is very much into promoting what our club stands for, the Roosters. We call it the Roosters Way, etc. Yep. In terms of Michael Cheika and your coaching career, and let's go back when you're coaching Australia, beyond Australia, beyond the 15, 16, wasn't it?
Yep.
Coach Australia? Let's go beyond that. Let's go like 2010.
Yep.
Who were you coaching that period?
2010, I just finished coaching Leinster. In Ireland. I've been there 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So you did a 5-year stint at Leinster. Yep. What are the sorts of things that you get the clubs that you're responsible for? What do you sort of try and instill in them? Is it Michael Cheika's view, or is it the community view that you read the community, or is it the players give you some input as to how you guys can, let's call it, promote yourselves as what you stand for? How do you do that?
I think that with every team, there'll always be a history, and there'll always be a culture and identity that comes through from the past. And I feel that as far as our connection with supporters, which is the important one, how the people see us, both our supporters to support us and the opposition's supporters so they can be against us.
As a view on you,
as a view on the team, is that we want to keep that historical element going and then improve that.
How do you review that? I mean, how do you get your head around that part? What do you do?
I think it's about talking to people inside of the club, proper induction, even before you go there. I would, any team I've been to, I've always try to learn as much as I can about the history of the club. Say at Leinster, for example, they had a reputation of being the fancy city boys, never really got to the top. They were pitched and they played a bit of rugby. They threw it around a bit. They were known more for their backs and their forwards, say. Whereas they were
running style rugby.
Yeah. Whereas they were pitted against Munster, who were at that stage European champions or thereabouts. More not from the city, more country folks, tough, hard rugby, more forward orientated, kick and chase. So there was a clear contrast in styles. And I felt like, okay, well, I need to continue that feeling, polish it up so that it's slick, but also underneath that have the hard edge. That maybe not talk about it too much but you need it to win. So keep your identity.
Is it hard as being brutal?
Yeah,
a little bit brutal.
Yeah, tough and hard.
Yeah.
Train
not
hard.
Just cop it, but how to give it.
Yeah. Train hard. Be ready as far as those things are concerned. Like be prepared to play the game tough, because there's some games you're going to have to play that aren't going to be running rugby. I remember with that team, 2009, we won European Championship. On the way through,
which year is that? First
2009. Year? No, that was the third.
Third.
Yeah. We played a game in the quarterfinal against Harlequins away from home, which we won 6-5.
Whoa.
So 2 goals to 2 penalties which certainly wasn't us. And I remember the chairman of the club coming to me that day. He says, I've been telling you we need to learn how to win, 9-6 or 9, because we could win 30-20 or 30-30, 31-30. But to win 6-5, it almost like galvanised us in a way. And we went on and won the semi-final in Dublin and then won the final, which was up in Murrayfield. And it gave us that little bit of edge that we could win in that tough, more confidence. We could win at the top level against top teams in a tough battle where we weren't just scoring points, because defence obviously is a huge, and the contact's a huge part of the game.
So how hard is it to get, especially in that example at Leinster, when they weren't winning, prior to you coming along. How hard is it to get that winning mentality, knowing how to win? Maybe you could explain what that means, but because a lot of clubs, even in rugby league, don't know how to win. Or a lot of young players who are not used to it, they don't know how to win.
Mark, at the top level, if I can't tell you the exact stats, right? But if you think about it in its reality, it's got to be somewhere between only 5 and 8 or 9% of people are winning. Because you think in any 1 year a team wins, there's in the rugby league there's 16 teams that lose. In Super Rugby there's 9 other teams that lose. In so winning mentality, you have to learn it through the way you drive yourself at training, the way that you don't want to settle for second best,
Is that
or
coachable?
errors. Definitely.
By
setting up the environment for people to thrive in that way. And those that don't thrive, you have to change. And those that
Meaning
do
you
thrive,
get-
that's part of the
exit.
business, And those that do thrive, they push on, and they might drive others on with them, And you'll never get everyone in that line, but you need a certain group of them that will drive that type of habit, and that will bring the others along with them.
It's an interesting mentality. Do you sit down? But I mean, what does say Michael Cheika do? Do you appoint a senior leadership team and do you brief them, or do they run that? I mean, do you rely on them to run that program?
Different teams require different things, and then you require change and evolution as you move on. So what I started doing at Leinster was probably a little bit more, I'll drag you by the ear and show you. Like, I was even young enough back then to jump into training with them, and get.
But what would you do when you did that?
Yeah,
What would you
slug them?
Yeah,
get in there and cause trouble. And
Yeah.
if I was looking at that point in particular, and wait for them to come back at me, And it took a while, but it was younger guys who started to take that lift that back, because the older guys had different habits, and if you want to change habits, you can't get rid of it. You've got to actually change it. You can't eliminate a habit. You've got to replace it with something else. Otherwise, it's too hard. It's too hard. You keep going back to that habit. But if you've got another habit to put there, then it can replace that habit and shift it out. And over a period of time, and you've got to be quite relentless in that, which doesn't always make you the most popular guy in town. That you can build that. One gets it, then another gets it, and the dominoes start to fall. And once there's a critical mass, or a critical few even, they can bring the others where you want them to go.
So after Leinster, did that take us to you coaching the Australian side, or what happened between those two?
I started off coaching. I had a year in Italy, right?
Yep.
1 year
That's right.
in 99.
And do you speak Italian?
I do, from playing over there. Yeah.
By the way, do you speak Arabic?
Enough, enough to get by. I couldn't read and write, but can definitely communicate, get over, in most of the Arabic countries. And then obviously French when I played over there, and Italian I played over there, and then Spanish when I coached the Argies just now.
Spoke a bit of Spanish as well?
Well, I pretty much learned. I've watched about 60 episodes of Narcos, so I was good to go, with subtitles. Well, all the Latin languages are pretty the same, right? You just got to get your head around it. And then, of course, I just said to them, I'm going to speak in your language and I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. So you just help me on the way, which turned out to be a bit of a team building thing in itself.
To the players you're talking about?
Yeah.
So you coached in Italy?
Yep.
Then
I went to, came back to Australia. That was when my father passed, and I stayed here and I coached Randwick for a few years, and then got the position at Leinster. And then from there, I went stud Francais. I actually was, after Leinster, I said to my wife, let's have a year's break, because I could have continued there, but I think we wanted to have a break. We had a young one just born who was 15 months, and we had twins that were about to be born after that, so we would have been 3 under 2. So we thought we'd take a year off. We went to Paris, where we had a place to have a year off, and then they went on to fire their coach that was there within a few months. And in fact, it was I'd made friends with the Argentinian crew because I coached Felipe Contempomi in Leinster for those years. And they came and saw me, said, come coach Stade Francais. There was a few of them there. And I thought, oh, well, I'm here. I may as well, which isn't the real way to prepare for when you're going to do something. But coached Stade Francais for a couple of years, and then from there came back to the Waratahs. And then after Waratahs, coached Australia.
So if I asked you, what was Michael Cheika's style? relative to interaction with players during that period of coaching the Australian side.
Mhm.
How would you describe your style looking back?
Yeah. I'm pretty honest guy. Like, I think I'm very honest with players, whether it's in the positive or the negative, sometimes. I like players to focus on strengths, not on weaknesses, because if they're playing for Australia and they've got a certain weakness, it means it's there. You know what I mean? It's something that they've had from young. So I don't need them to, the chance that they're going to turn that into a strength, you'd need hours and hours and hours and hours of practice that you don't have by that stage. So you need to handle and you need to be competent in that area, but I'd rather them, be doing what they're good at.
So what do you do? Map that out? Do you say sit down with each
Yeah,
individual player?
talk to the players.
Did you ask? Would you say to the player, say, okay, what do you think your strengths are and weaknesses, or do you tell them what you think?
No. This comes from them,
More
because
consultative.
I think they also have to be aware of what their strength. Unfortunately, I think a lot of guys, when you ask them to evaluate themselves or players, I talk about guys, I've only coached the men, right? So that they evaluate themselves in a negative way. Maybe it's
Really?
because of the way. Well, yeah, because I don't know if it's a cultural thing at Tall Poppies or but instead of just being accurate and being comfortable to say, yeah, I did this really well, or I think this is my strength, I can go to there. Whenever you give them a chance to score themselves, they'll always score themselves. Well, a lot of the guys, I won't say all of them, would score themselves on the lower level. And I think that's something you've got to stay humble, but you've also got to have strong self-belief. That is a really important part of building a winner's mindset. Because if you don't stay humbled, you'll be humbled. That's for sure. But you've also got to know, I've got this. I'm going to make it count. I can make this happen. Because when you think like that, it actually makes the guy next to you feel a little bit more like he can think like that, and so on and so forth. That's what happens inside of the team environment when a critical few start thinking in a certain way, the others come along.
Because when I know, I don't know whether viewers know this, but two things I know about. Well, there's two people I know. One thing they both have in common, and that's you and Trent Robinson. That most people who don't know you don't realise that you're both sort of quite. What's the word?
This will be interesting.
Well, I know I find both of you very similar in one aspect. Obviously, know Robbo better than you, but like in one aspect, there is a common denominator between the two of you, which is probably one of the reasons you both get on so well. Is you're both very thoughtful, quite pensive about things. Like I'll probably take it to the next level, intellectual about stuff. You even get a little bit weird in the way you intellectualize things. I can't imagine what yours and his conversations are like. I mean, I speak to Robbo a fair bit, and he's like, even when we're doing jiu-jitsu, like Robbo will be asking our coach. Our coach is trying to show us a drill, but Robbo wants to know, okay, but once we do that drill, what's the reason for that? Is Mark's going to grab me on the leg, or is he going to do something?
Yeah.
And Robbo wants to go right through to the very end. He wants to know every single step. What's the relevance of that drill relative to every step, and what's every step mean until I get to the end? And I can see him, even when I'm wrestling with him, I can feel him think. I actually feel Robbo thinking about what's going on here. Like, do I do this? And he'll have 30 alternatives, and they're both very similar, which, as I said, birds of a feather tend to stick together. So that intellectualizing process is not just, by the way, in terms of footy, but probably everything you do in your life. I class that as a little bit weird. I don't mean a bad way, but not normal sort of thing. Sort of like nearly geeky, like. Whereas your reputation was Check is a tough bastard, says what he thinks, and if you don't do what he says, like you're going to ram it down their throat type of thing. Reputation back in 2015. Whereas actual fact, you and Robbo are very similar. You think a lot about stuff. You really do the research, but apart from that, you think it through every move.
Well, I think as a coach in particular, if you're organized that way, you do need to think it right the way through, because you're catering for all the players and how they might see the game, not just one or two. So some might see just what's happening in front of them and just play that. And some are playing out, okay, if I do this, how's that going to pan out down there? And I think you've got to be able to see that chain of events unfold, no matter what it is. Even if you're watching a movie, I'm always wanting to know what's happening at the end before it even starts, opposed to sit through it. Or predicting, trying to predict, oh, this is what's going to
You'd be
happen.
good
Or
at
he
chess.
did it.
That's like playing chess.
Well, I should have played more because I have never really played, to be honest. It's
But it is
maybe
like
a
playing
game I could
chess.
pick. Yeah, thinking about the moves ahead, I suppose, in that way. And it's also from like I said, from a catering point of view to all the players, because they all have a different way of looking at the game. They'll ask different questions. So you can help articulate ideas you have, strategies that you want to bring in, or a technical element that you're trying to help that player to see. Because often, especially when it comes to contact area, a lot of players, it's hard for them to see because of the different proprioception. Like, you can't see your body always when it's in low position and it's in a contact zone. You don't feel it. Like, sometimes you think you're high, you're low, but you're actually high.
You can't stand back and look at yourself.
That's right. And I think that if you can see the knock-on effects of those things and how they'll play out at the end, you're able to explain more things to a wider group of people. Because, Mark, anytime you're up there talking to the lads, so say you got 30 in your squad or 35, whatever, there's probably 8 to 10 different ways of interpreting what you're saying. People are interpreting it in small groups. I wouldn't say everyone's different in that way, but they could be thinking about it differently. So you've got to try and cater for everyone. And you can almost see it when you look in their eyes, or when you're talking to them, if you've got them or if you haven't got them at any given time. I think as far as the other bit's concerned, I don't do myself any favours sometimes when I'm on the coach's box. But I'm the type of person who likes to get it out. But I'm always thinking, or even sometimes if I do it, it's calculated because I want a certain, I want a certain outcome
need some
for
theatre.
people who are looking, or people. I won't say every time, because you put a lot into it and you've got to keep a tab on your emotions. But sometimes it's strategized.
Because and it's interesting you just said that about you might have, a team of 15 or add reserves on whatever, but just say the 15. You might have 5 groups of 3, just to make it easy.
Yep.
Who interpret whatever you're saying differently, based on how they think, them as individuals. So you're sort of nearly got to be a psychologist in some respects. Because you really need to have everybody profiled.
Yep.
You need to profile each person as to how he receives your message.
Definitely. That is so important. And, you try to get everyone, and even asking the right questions. I coached a fella in France who was an international player, great player, right? But at training, he wasn't the greatest trainer of all time. And often when we were doing closed drills, so things that wasn't open field playing, it was more designed towards the technical part of the game, or to have a certain outcome in this scenario. Now, often when we use those, you map out the field with cones and you get yourself sorted out. Well, I could never work out why he was never quite at the level that he should be at those things. So finally, I asked the right question, which I should have asked months before. What's going on here, mate? How come? Colorblind. Couldn't see
really?
the colours of the cones. Never told me.
So
It can be that simple. I think you just need to know. You need to ask as many questions as possible and get to know the guys in different ways. And you could profile without doing it in a formal format as well.
and a non-insulting format.
Exactly.
Because
right.
you
But
can't look. They can't think, oh shit, he's profiling me.
No, but I think there's sometimes you can say you want to get into character a little bit more, as long as you're explaining to fellas what you're up to. I think, and you're transparent on that front. And then there's other times where you can do it, and then you have to be able to make sure that you're keeping the continuity of notes, because people change. People change as they get older. It's quite normal.
They evolve,
or they get more experience.
hopefully.
Yeah, I think most players do, and that you've got to map those changes so you don't pigeonhole one person as like this now, and they'll always be like that, because that's not the case.
So you said something very interesting, which I wouldn't mind exploring a bit. But as a coach, it's funny. I've never thought about this before, but based on what you're just saying, it's made me think about it. As a coach, I always just assumed it's about the coach telling the players, but you're saying to me as a coach is probably equally important as to asking players. So, asking the right questions, asking them the right questions, as
Yeah.
opposed to encouraging them to ask you the right questions so you can deliver the answers to their questions. I mean, how do you work out the blend of that stuff?
Well, again, it depends on the level that you're coaching at as well. When you're at the international
So you're
level,
coaching Australia.
yeah, those players, they don't. They're better players than I ever would have been. Like they don't need me to tell them how to play footy. They've got most of the answers inside of their own head. It's just like business coaching. It's
Yeah.
the same. It's about getting the person to find the solutions themselves, guided through the framework that we have as a team, because that's what you're doing as a coach. You're putting all those different talents together to make a team. The individual development of those players, especially at that level, it's really being done at their club teams in Super Rugby, in rugby, or if it's with the Kangaroos or in Origin in their rugby league teams that they're playing for during the week. So I think that, yes, you can help develop that a little bit if there's things they want to work on longer term. But the times you've got them in camp, there's not a lot of movement for that. And by rights, when they're playing at the international level, that's where they are. That's where they're playing against the best. They're the best in their game. So
In that position.
yeah, and so they should be honed. Their skills should be honed already.
So
and
is
then
it
they're
not a
working on
skill
it.
thing they need from you, but you need? But do they
If
need?
they want it, yes.
But
Right?
do they ever ask for it?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
yeah. Lots of players. I think players are quite attuned to the. I think it's about you. They want to do it. It's about then you helping them, give them the correct framework for what they want to work on. Because if you're looking to improve a certain skill, it might need small reps daily, a bit of a technical fix, and then small reps on that technical fix daily on training days, just a short amount of time all the way through the year, and just see the incremental gain. But focus that they're improving that technical part of their game. Don't just say practice and not follow up on the quality of the practice, because there's no point practicing the wrong thing, is there? Right.
But is the objective, Michael, for you to sit there, be the observer to them and feed them back? So you can say, listen,
Yeah.
I've been watching you practice, mate, but blah, this is what you're not doing. This is
Without
what you're
it.
doing this well, but maybe you can put just a little bit of edge on, because they can't see themselves.
That's right. Or hear how they think it's going, because their perception of how it's going is often different to what's actually happening.
Yeah, totally.
That, especially if depending on your mindset at that time, and you got to think about, you've always got to pay attention to results. So what's the outcome, right? I think that's the last step of that for the person. But it might be something in kicking, could be in passing, in tackling, or you could be looking to get just an immediate turnaround, and that can be just a technical fix that a player, the penny drops for them, and it changes straight away, and that's it. It's done.
How's Cheika evolved? Well, what's the difference between Cheika
Yeah.
today and 25? Oh, it's actually 10 years. So
Yeah.
what's the difference?
Like, I think I'm always learning, from the very start of either playing to coaching and then all the way through, whether it was, what I learned along the way at Leinster that took me into the Waratahs, what I learned there. And you've always got your doubts and your fears. Even when I was at Waratahs, I thought we'd won European Cup in Ireland, in Europe, and we came to Super Rugby, and I had my doubts, like, will the style of footy that I'm preparing work in the Southern Hemisphere? I hadn't coached there before. That's why I particularly targeted a guy like Daryl Gibson, who'd been coaching at Crusaders. So he gave me that sort of bouncy sounding board to say, okay, yeah, this is okay, this will work out. You can continually articulate your ideas. And I think as you go along, like, I never expected even to be coaching Australia then, at the time when it happened, because it did happen quite quickly and by surprise. So you learn your way through, and you learn new things. The game's changing, the players are changing, and I should change as well. Not change, evolve and learn new things, but still have the same principles that I think are important to the game, because they're not things that you're going to change. And it's about how you then integrate those. Whether I suppose I used a lot of different techniques when I was with Argentina. I took a look at culturally, what would suit them best as far as their culture, like the more Latin style culture, and what I could bring as a coach, and what they needed from me as a coach. Was it more an Anglo-Saxon mindset around organisation, etc., or was it more, which I can flick between the two, obviously because of my heritage? And I think that evolution for me has been more a learning process along the way of different things, not just inside of rugby, around psychology, even around business management, things that you can learn, the tools that you can then go and apply back to football, how you deal with people, how you deal with the management above, all those types of things I think that you want to do as a person, in order to achieve the challenges, whether it's a business challenge or a sporting one in this instance, So for me, it's not about evolving so I can do something else. It's about making sure you keep learning new things, keep getting better. That's really important to me. Keep improving. And I know it's not a direct
It's not
linear
linear.
line. It's not from here to there. I'm going to keep going up. That there's ups and downs, and how you recover from those downs, which I've always been really good at, and then try to turn those negatives into positives and get something from them. So I think, but it just comes also with experience too. You've had so many experiences that you've seen so many things before, and you're always trying to modify. How can I do that better? What would I have done in this situation if I had a chance to hit it again? Because those situations will come again, right? No matter who you're coaching. And that's when you've got to act on that. Otherwise, the previous experience is worthless.
It's funny because that sort of takes us back to the very beginning when you're talking about your dad. And if I could use the word bold as a part of as an adjective to describe him, like he was bold. In other words, he would just take things on, and no matter what, even when he wasn't physically well, a bold attitude. Like just coming to Australia, like in itself, is a pretty bold attitude. Arriving here with probably not very much money and nowhere to go, and it sort of seems like you're a bit of a reflection of that in some respects. And you've coached your country, you've coached your state, you've coached Ramwick, at a top level, top level first grade environment. You've coached assistant rugby league. You've coached Lebanon. You've coached in Ireland. You're currently coaching in England. You've coached in France. Like you've coached everywhere. You've gone and just done all these weird things. And those experiences are really important to you. One of the experiences I want to ask you about, which not many people know about this, but can you take me back to when you worked for Colette Dinnigan or with Colette Dinnigan? Because here's a bloke, here's a footy head, but was involved in the fashion industry.
Yes.
And talk about bold, that's right out there. Talk about it.
Mate, I've always liked to have that. I think maybe when I was younger, I couldn't articulate it in this way, but about balance. So often now when you go, okay, we've got to be obsessed about winning, which you do. If you're going to win, if you're going to be in the 5% or 7%, you've got to be obsessed.
You want to be good, you got to be obsessed.
So if there's the scales, you tip the scales down there of obsession, but you want to have balance, which is important. So instead of just being less obsessed to keep the scale more balanced, I'd rather do things that are totally off kilter to what I'm doing on the other side of it to bring the balance back. And I've always tried to do that, whether it's, do some crazy course that I'm absolutely not qualified to do, or get a job that I was not qualified to do, and it led into having a business. So what happened was I'd been playing overseas. So like we were talking about before, I learned to speak the languages over there. And then I came home mid-90s. I decided I was going to have some time back in Australia permanently. And the game started going pro. There was that whole World Rugby Corporation thing, and I was involved in that. That never happened, and it went back to the establishment, and players started getting paid, and I had the opportunity to go into pro rugby then, and I figured that I didn't really want to. I liked the idea of having the opportunity to still possibly travel. So I needed to get a job, right? And that was it. I hadn't really worked a lot, to be honest, since I left school. Yeah. Playing footy and doing a few bits and pieces. My cousins had a couple of shops up in Paddington and fashion stores. And I saw the job ad in the day I used to look in the newspaper, right? And they wanted a business manager. And hopefully Colette is not watching, so she won't find out. But I'm sure she knows. I had the languages, which she wanted, and I embellished the rest, in my CV, as many a person has done.
No, we've all done it.
I got the job. And it worked out perfectly. She was brilliant to work with. I spent there.
Well, you were like a rep.
What's that?
No, like a
business manager. Sort of ran the staff.
But why'd you go to Russia?
What's that?
Why'd you go to Russia?
Russia. That was a different story, mate, going to Russia. It wasn't with Colette going to Russia.
No, I don't want to stitch up, but someone has briefed me on this stuff.
I had those experiences.
Russia back then, by the way.
Yeah, 91 it was. That was even before.
Just straight after.
It was before. It was Gorbachev just come in.
It's a Soviet,
Well, without jumping all over the place, I was playing footy in France, and I was playing in Paris at the time, if I'm not wrong. And my cousin, who was living there, knew this American lady who was selling software back in the time. And for some reason, they didn't want the she was going to sell to a big Russian industrial. So they wouldn't send her tech, right? And so said she take a local tech. And I don't know, they said, do you want to come Russia? I had no idea about computers whatsoever. So I basically got a glossary of computer terms, learned as many words as I could, and then went there with her, and it was amazing. It was genuinely amazing. So we went to Moscow first. I won't go through all the hassles we got getting in there. And then we went to a place called Yekaterinburg, which was Sverdlovsk in the USSR, where I think Boris Yeltsin was from originally. It's where they killed the Tsar in Russian
1990.
history. Yeah. So, and she was selling to these people there. And I went into a room with 50 computer programmers, and I had no idea. Like, I had an interpreter, thank God. It was maybe mixed it, but they didn't care because all they wanted to know was what was going on in the West. That was it. I was the first person they'd ever spoken to from outside of Russia.
Wow.
It was like,
This is during the USSR
it
period.
was just after,
Just after.
perestroika.
Yeah,
time,
right.
Perestroika. So there was a lot of poverty there. Obviously, at that time, it was quite sad in that part, but it was crazy. We had such a great time just sitting around talking about what was the questions they asked me. They gave me gifts, small gifts from there, and then it was pretty fun. Like, that night they did the deal, and of course back to the dasha and drink the vodka and eat. And the girl who was running the show, she passed out, so I had to stay there with these guys up until about 4 a.m. And literally, Mark, you would have to take your luggage, foreigners one way, Russians the other, and you'd have to put your own bag, like your hold bag, into the hull of the plane, and then just walk up the stairs. Yeah, it was hectic. And it was such a brilliant experience, like, to go there, even though it had a few issues at the time getting in and getting out, but to go there and have those. And I think those experiences for me have always been I've always liked to have a total different life away from rugby, doing some crazy things, some other things of learning or whatever it is, so I can keep balance, because I can be quite obsessed about trying to win or have my team be the best that they possibly can. And you've got to do some things like that, I think, all the time. You've got to have that mentality to keep yourself balanced.
Can you bring that richness of life into the Australian rugby union side, that winning, and help them learn how to be a winning organisation again, and bring the pride back to Australia?
Well, I think the pride's always there, man. I understand people want results, but anytime I see them play, even when I'm obviously not being the coach for many years now, I'm very proud of the colours. My kids are still proud of the colours. And the thing is, when you play for Australia, you're not just playing for the rugby fans, you're playing for everyone. And that's a different feeling, that a different responsibility, but it's a responsibility that should be enjoyed. And I think one thing that we should be doing is having that belief in yourself, because that comes with belief in yourself. I can do different things. I can be a different type of, and when I cross the white line, this is what I'm doing.
That comes to you naturally. How are you? Because look at you. You've gone to Russia. Can you bring that experience to the young fellas?
You create the environment that lets them do that. They've got to be able to do that. Let them do that while working on their craft. And being best at in working in their craft and their skills, and having a mindset, working individually with players all the time. I think that's really important, letting them have an individual and having the time to do that, mate. Because one thing's really, it's interesting. I always say to the guys where I'm at now, if I want to talk to you for 5 minutes, all of you each, for 5 minutes after training, which is not a long conversation, it's going to take me 3.5 hours because of how many are in the squad. So the time that you take and the ability to pay that individual attention, because that's the next level. There's the footy coaching, then there's that next level of bringing people out so they can be better person, better player, happy, enjoy the responsibility, because it's high stakes when you get out there. That's the joy of Test footy. It's high stakes. And you want to enjoy that experience, even though there's they say pressure. I don't think it is. It's just, there's lots on the line, and you've got to enjoy that experience.
And and this is my final question too. It's a bit cheeky though. Did Phil Ward disclose to you whether or not they're talking to Nathan Cleary to bring him over to play for the
I
Wallabies?
don't know about that one, mate. There was no disclosure whatsoever.
No disclosure.
I think there's a lot, like, as you can see, there's the games, as far away as they might be, in a lot of areas, they're very close in
Yeah.
others. I've seen many players, Marika Korobetti, Israel Folau. There's been so many different players
Sonny
that have
Bill
come
Williams.
and gone. Sonny Bill Williams, lots of Ben Teo.
Yeah.
There's examples everywhere. And, even look at Sam Burgess. He went there. I think he was totally mishandled by England when they had the opportunity. If he was given that one position, blindside flanker, go and do what you do, he would have killed it as well. He still did well in itself, having to play in a really difficult position. I think it's just about being able to do that. And I think it's the same for rugby guys going the other way at this point. You look, I think there's Mark Nawanga-Nitawasi has been playing for Roosters. The young 5'8's gone up to play with the Titans. So I think that there's crossover both ways. And the difference will be that is always around the mentality. If you've got the good mentality, you'd be able to play both quite easily. That mentality, like you talk about players like Sonny Bill Williams, etc., who have the ability, the mindset to succeed in both. I think that's something that's going to happen in the future, whether the different organisations like it or not. And I think that it'll be great when we see players crossing over more often.
Could I have just one more question? And I was just regarding the South Africa, just as an observation from your point of view, I'd be interested to hear the answer. South Africa doesn't seem to be, to me anyway, today, watching them, doesn't seem to be the same Springboks as we got in the mid-90s with the Tian Strausses of the world. Well, I think he might have been playing for Australia at that stage, but early on when he was captaining the Springboks, that toughness, that sort of, literally, I mean, Tian told me that when he was a kid, father used to drive alongside a small wildebeest, and push him off and make him try and tackle it from behind. I mean, it's the sort of stuff you see these Dagestani wrestlers, their kids are wrestling bears. I've seen it on videos, like in the UFC today.
Yeah.
That's sort of, I don't know, I don't know how to explain it, but it's sort of like a do or die mentality that the Springboks had. It doesn't seem to exist today in South Africa.
I think across the board that it's not as... because of the building of pathways to come through, like you can play as a young player here and go through there. All of that older school style of getting to the top maybe has disappeared a little bit. But I still think that those that do go down that road, that still they can parallel that with modern day pathway, etc. They do that little bit extra, they get that little bit extra edge. They'll always have the advantage because they'll be doing something that their opponents or their competition aren't doing. And I think the South Africans have, while they may have gone away from that, what they've done is their player pool has hugely increased, as things have changed since apartheid days, etc. And they've got vicious competition for places, and that can cause in itself the competition to be better and practice harder and do what you need to do. And that's why they're double world champions now, the last two World Cups, and they're probably favourites to go into this one coming up as going for a triple.
Because sitting opposite me here in your chair about 3 weeks ago, I had Dricus du Plessis, the South African UFC middleweight champion of the world, and he has that thing that I was talking about in relation that I observed with Tian Strauss back in the 90s, who I was lucky enough to know. He actually worked for one of my businesses, and I started observing and thinking about South Africa. It just doesn't seem to have that hardness, and I'm always interested to know from people like you, because you strike me as a person who's a student of rugby union, but in that you're always observing it, always watching it, but you also seem to be a student of rugby league, probably football, like, as in soccer, and all the other team sports, probably, maybe even other sports, individual sports. Is that a thing for you? Is that like part of your obsession? Is that Michael Cheika, that I need to understand, learn, observe, be curious? Is that your process?
Without a doubt. Last week I was lucky enough to spend Thursday at Silverstone with McLaren and the testing day. They had the two cars out, spent the whole day there with them. It was incredible, and even just some of the way they communicate around the pit wall, things that we could, help us. I feel like, how can I have more impact on the game when it's happening? Because sometimes you've got to try and grow what type of influence you can have. What's the communication method we use? Because there's guys are listening to maybe 12 or 14 audio channels at the same
Really?
time. They just dial in and dial out of what they need to do. And they're
driving.
and they're talking about life and death.
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
what I mean here, like when they're driving at that speed. So the chief engineers, their communications, are telling me that their communications post race would get reviewed by, I think military or something like that, so that they've got a really clear process in how their communication is going, just to see different sports, how they work, what the things that we have that they don't, and the things that they do that we don't, and what can be taken across, what can be used, and even just for general knowledge. It's amazing to see how some of the other sports that I've been lucky enough to go in and see, whether it's NFL, football, or in the UK or any of those things, so many transferable processes or skills that we can use in our game as well.
If there was a team sports person around the world today, my final question, that you could sit down with and spend a couple of hours with, who would that be?
Team sports.
Person, yeah, like a person playing in a team, and it could be someone who's maybe recently retired or whatever the case may be.
There's a few guys. Obviously, Messi would be very interesting.
Wow, yeah.
He because of his
longevity for a start.
Longevity, and also how, if you look at the last World Cup of football, how the team played almost for him as well as for the country.
Amazing.
And the influence that he has, and the stories you hear about him. I have met him, but the stories you hear about him as a pro, I think you see a guy now like Tom Brady, for example, who's coming out and talking a lot more, right, about his. But Messi's there's something different about him. He's got a real humility, even though he's like one of the biggest. He's got a great balance in the way his sporting career has gone, the ups and the downs, and what he's maintained, how he's loved by his country, and the way he's affected other teammates. I'd say if there was one right now playing, he'd probably be the guy.
Yeah, Messi, I agree with you. I mean, I don't know exactly which year, but I remember seeing him in a World Cup final, and it feels like it might have been in 2000, like it might have been in Rome. Not a final, but in the build up to the final. I don't remember. It's nearly 20 years ago. So his longevity is amazing to me. Like how someone can last that long at that level, and it's not like he played more recently. It's not like he's been played the same as he did when he was younger. He adapted his game to allowing to play at the top level, but not expecting himself to be the same as he always was. In other words, like your physicality sort of reduces as you get older. Things you can't do. There's just things you can't do that you could do when you're younger. But he's sort of managed to work all that shit out and adapt his game, but still be at the top.
Yeah,
like his mentality is amazing.
But that's it. It's about having the mentality that you, first of all, you can be the best, right? Because that's the first battle. I'll never be the best. There's too many good players better than me. Well, no, you can be the best. Then working out what's the plan for me to be the best and stick to it, even when maybe you aren't the best and you won't be the best all the time. But then I'll come back and be there. And that mentality, that ambition, it drives. I remember I became good friends and still am with Alessandro Del Piero when he played at Sydney FC.
Yeah,
that guy was like uber prepared. He could have just come here and cruised, right? But he had his own fitness coach, his own, the detail he went through with his soccer review, the review of the games. He was 40 and still, killing it here. I think that mentality of those types of champion players, and I'm sure there's lots of them in other sports. I think even in league, in union, there's guys around everywhere.
Darren Cherry Evans is a good example. Unbelievable. Like his preparation, I hear stories about his preparation is like legendary. James Tedesco.
Yep.
Teddy, like, is a great measure of everything. Like he knows how well he slept. He knows what his deep sleep was. He knows what his REM sleep was the night before, etc. He knows his recovery rates as a percentage of his normal process, like down to mathematical stuff. And I think that's their longevity.
I think it is. And it's also not just about longevity. It's part of why they got to the very, very top in the first place. Because they probably didn't know those things at the start, but they learnt those things along the way. They took them with them and kept them going on. And I think that's That's really important for all players to understand that, because they can be the best. There's, one day everyone was playing third grade, and then the next year they're playing first grade for some reason. It happens. And I think that it starts with that seed of that mindset inside of you. Not, okay, I've made it now, so now I'll do all the things. Like Messi was probably doing all of those things, I'd imagine, from way back when, to become the player he's become today and have the longevity that he's had.
Yeah, practice is so important. I remember Nathan Cleary and Ivan, who was sitting here late this year, or late last year, I should say, after the grand final, the week after the grand final, saying how much Nathan practices. Like, his practice regime after training, when everyone else is going home, is out of this world. Like, he just keeps kicking and keeps kicking and keeps. And Andrew Johns used to say the same thing about his kicking. Practicing banana kicks and all these unusual kicks that Joey used to be able to do. And I think that's probably, I see it in business too. The best business people are people who are practicing their stuff all the time.
Always.
Never stop.
That's right. I remember Nathan, he came out one day. I asked him to come out when I was coaching Argentina. He came and kicked with the lads one day. I still owe him a bottle of Malbec, actually, which I've got to send him somewhere along the way. He was just, his knowledge of what he spoke to the guys. I even spoke to the guys in the World Cup. They were still in 23. They were still talking about it. He that type of thing. And I think that those guys, like say even Andrew Johns, who are creative types as well, all that crazy stuff that they do, they practice. So I remember Brian O'Driscoll. I've coached him. I was lucky enough to coach him for many years. And he was always practicing mad stuff at training, and then one day he pulls it off in a game. He threw it over. I think they were on the edge. He threw it over the winger's head, ran around the back of him, and then caught it himself, ran down the sideline. But, normally a coach will blow up. What's he doing here? But you saw him practicing those things at training. So once those things are, he believes he can do it. So the seed's sown, then he practices how he does it, and then he goes out and does it. And if it succeeds or fails, it doesn't matter, because he's been through and that's what gives you the belief that things are going to go well, because I've done it. I've prepped it, I've done it, I'm ready to go.
Michael Cheika, I wish you the very best. I know you're off to Leicester, that's in the UK as opposed to Ireland, to continue the finishing off your season for your club. And I really enjoyed our conversation. Like, we got into the weeds a bit. Hopefully, everybody, that wasn't too much for you, but we got into the weeds a little bit. But I really enjoyed it. Good on you, mate.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.